So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In this video today, we are going to discuss the reticular formation and its associated clinicals. Now, first of all, we need to know that reticular formation, as its name is saying that it is made up of a reticulum, it is made up of nerve cells and nerve fibers. And this network, for example, if it is over there, so it extends the whole spinal cord and the whole cerebral cortex. So, spinal cord, the cerebrum, and the spinal cord, etc. It receives input from the sensory system and has efferent, which are the fibers that are emerging from it. They descend and influence nerve cells at the central nervous system level. So it is receiving the input from the sensory system, and its efferents are going in the cortex, in the central nervous system, that is brain and spinal cord both. It can influence the skeletal muscle activity, the somatic, the visceral sensations, as well as autonomic and the endocrine system. So you can say that it is involved with the somatic sensation, that is the level of consciousness, etc. Then it is also involved with visceral sensations that are involved with the autonomic nervous system. Then it is involved with endocrine system as well. So it is involved with both somatic as well as sympathetic and parasympathetic system. Now we are going to do the general arrangement. As I told you, it is made up of nerve cells and nerve fibers. So now it runs on the posterior side of the spinal cord, medulla and pons, and subthalamus and hypothalamus, and it has three columns actually: the median column, the medial column, and the lateral column. And these three longitudinal columns are like this. We can see the approximate position that is made in this book. Just in the median side, we have the median column. Just a little bit lateral to it, we have the medial column. Medial means it is between the two. And then we have the lateral column. So median, that is placed medially. Then this medial column and this lateral column. Median column has intermediate neurons, whereas medial column has large neurons, and the lateral most column has small neurons. So intermediate, large, and small. Now they have written over here that the reticular formation is continuous inferiorly with the interneurons of the gray matter. So this is spinal cord, for example, and if you have reticular formation somewhere over here, so it is continuous with the interneurons of the spinal cord. Inferiorly and superiorly it goes to the cerebral cortex. Now they tell you that there can be monoaminergic fibers and polyaminergic fibers or polysynaptic fibers. Monoaminergic fibers, they are coming from well-defined areas throughout the reticular formation, whereas the polysynaptic fibers, they can be crossed, uncrossed, ascending, descending, as well as visceral and somatic. So they can be all type of fibers which are giving information to the reticular formation. Now this reticular formation has afferent pathways and efferent pathways, and then it has its functions. To look at the afferent pathways of the reticular formation, we are going to have a look at a diagram. Let's move to it. First of all, as I told you, that the reticular formation is going to receive impulses from the cortex and the spinal cord. So those are very important. So from the spinal cord, the fibers are directly coming, which are spino-reticular fibers. They are emerging from the spinal cord going to the reticular formation. So spino-reticular direct fibers. But sometimes from the ascending pathways, that are the corticospinal, the descending, the DCML pathway, they can give the collateral fibers, which are the coming from ascending tract. So direct spino-reticular fibers or certain fibers coming from the ascending tracts. Then cerebral cortex, the sensory-motor cortex. As I told you, sensory pathways are going to give its afferent sensation to them. Then from this thalamic apparatus, we have thalamus, then hypothalamus and subthalamus. All of them are going to give their information. Along with the cerebrum, the cerebellum will also give their sensations. So up till now we have done spinal cord, the direct and indirect. Indirect from the ascending tracts, then the cerebellum, then the cerebral cortex through its sensory cortex. Then we have thalamus as well. Then the cranial nerves, the vestibular and the cochlear nerve, which are going to arise our body of the situation through the vestibular cochlear nerve, they are also going to give the sensation. Then the limbic system. The limbic system has this amygdaloid, the hippocampal and the septal region. They are also going to give information. And the corpus striatum. This corpus striatum is a part of the lenticular formation system, that is the part of the basal ganglia and the basal nucleus that is made up of caudate nucleus and the putamen. Both of them, they are going to give their sensations. So spinal cord, cerebral cortex, along with that the cerebellum, along with that thalamus, along with that the limbic system is also going to give information. After that we have cranial nerves giving information, and then we have the corpus striatum. If you remember this diagram, you are good to go for the afferent. Afferent means the substances that are giving their information to the reticular formation. After that, we will look at the efferents, that are the pathways emerging out from the reticular formation. So now, as I told you that it was receiving fibers from the spinal cord, so it is giving out fibers to the spinal cord as well. So the fibers which were coming from the spinal cord to the reticular formation, they were spinoreticular fibers. But now the fibers emerging from the reticular formation going into the spinal cord, these autonomic centers which are giving their neurons, giving to interneurons of the spinal cord, they are going to be reticulospinal tract. Then we also have reticulocerebellar tracts. Then we also have reticuloolivary tracts. Along with that, we have reticulotectal, reticulorubral. Rubral means from the red nucleus, and reticulomesencephalic fibers. Mesencephalic, they are going to give to the substantia nigra. So red nucleus, which is present in the midbrain, substantia nigra present in the midbrain, and tectum present in the midbrain. So all the parts of the midbrain, they are also receiving reticular fibers. After that, we have the thalamus, hypothalamus, and subthalamus. They are also receiving it. So in the cerebral cortex, thalamus, hypothalamus, or subthalamus that are part of diencephalon, they are receiving it, the reticular formation. Then in the midbrain, these substances are receiving. Then the cerebellum is receiving again. Spinal cord is receiving again. Then medulla oblongata with its olivary nuclei is receiving. After that, we have the autonomic centers in the brain stem, and these fibers are going to be craniosacral outflow. Cranium is like the cranial region, the head and neck region, and sacral is going to be in the sacral vertebra region. It can be in the brain stem, but after that, the parasympathetic fibers, those are coming in the craniosacral region. So the efferent fibers are reticulospinal, reticulorubral, or to the midbrain, or from the reticular formation to the thalamic system, from the reticular formation to the cerebellum, the autonomic brain system, and the olivary nuclei in the medulla oblongata. These are all the supplies. Now we are going to look at the functions of the reticular formation. First of all, it is going to control consciously the skeletal muscles. Now you need to know that the reticulospinal fibers, they were coming into the anterior neuron regions or interneuron. But when they come to the anterior motor neuron, you know this is the motor neuron, and motor neuron is giving out alpha and gamma fibers. The alpha fibers and gamma fibers both are motor fibers, and they are going to control the muscle tone and the reflex sensitivity or activity. Another thing is reflex inhibition. What is reflex inhibition? For example, this is your arm, and your arm has a flexor muscle on the above and extensor on the downwards. So your reticular formation is going, if your flexor, if there are some nerves and they're coming to innervate the flexor muscles and flexor muscle flexes, then the reciprocal activation or inhibition of the antagonist or the extensor, it will be done by the reticular formation, because it's a type of reflex action. Then anti-gravity muscles, the tone of the anti-gravity muscles is maintained by the reticular formation. Then the respiratory muscle tone is also maintained by the reticular formation. Why is the respiratory muscle tone so important? It is so much important because if the respiratory muscles, they lose their tone, then we are going to have collapse of our lungs, and due to collapse of our lungs, we won't be able to breathe in the expiration, and they will collapse so much you can have respiratory distress syndrome like in the children. Now we are going to do the control of facial expression muscles. So one thing that they tell you, that sometimes a person gets a shock or something, but the person is still able to smile symmetrically. In that case, it means that their reticular formation is intact. So the reticular formation, it was receiving fibers from the limbic system, and it was also giving out fibers to that system. So is responsible for smiling symmetrically, even if the person is having a damage or a stroke and its corticobulbar fibers are damaged and completely paralyzed. So expression, control of the facial expression along with the control of skeletal muscles. Then we have control of somatic and visual sensations. Whenever we read it, we are always and always consider it that it has somatic as well as visual components. Somatic is like all the voluntary movements, whereas the visual sensations are the sensations which are going to your all the viscera, like your heart, your brain, your lungs, all these. And as you know, the lungs were studied in the skeletal muscle thing, so they can be facilitative, they can be inhibitory. Also, the gating mechanism of the glutamine pathway, the control of the pain receptors, that is also concerned or also regulated by the reticular formation. So, up till now, we studied that smiling in case of corticobulbar disintegration, that was facial expression. Then your skeletal muscles. After that, your somatic and visual sensations. After that, control of the autonomic nervous system. As I told you, that there were certain parasympathetic fibers, and these parasympathetic fibers had their craniosacral outflow, and this craniosacral outflow is maintained by your main region, that is the reticular formation. Always remember this. Along with that, the autonomic nervous system, it can have reticulo spinal as well as the reticular rubral fibers, which were coming from the midbrain. Also, you can have your reticulobulbar fibers as well. These bulbar fibers are coming from the basal ganglia. Now, the control of endocrine system. You know, your reticular formation is responsible to maintain consciousness, and this consciousness is maintained by your endocrine system because this system is closely related with the hypothalamic nuclei. And one of the hypothalamic nuclei, it gives off their information and it goes to the hypothalamus. And this hypothalamus, and when coming to this hypothalamus pituitary gland, it allows it to either releasing factors or inhibiting factors. Now, influence on biological clock. One thing that you need to know is that your circadian rhythm, that is when you need to sleep, when you're feeling sleepy, when you're feeling the urge to wake up, that is controlled by the biological clocks, and that is controlled by a reticular formation, because the afferent and efferent pathway, they apprise us of the surroundings, like the degree of the sunlight that is coming, the degree of activity that you need to be showing, all of that is done by your reticular formation. After that, the reticular activating system, this is so much important because arousal and maintaining consciousness is controlled by your reticular system. Now, to tell you that how do you need to know that when you need to wake up? That thing is controlled by the amount of the sensory information that you are receiving. For example, when you are sleeping and you can sleep for 12 hours and so on, but that sleeping is interrupted by a person shaking you, because that amount of the sensory information now you are receiving is more. In the morning, you have a lot of sensory information, the birds chirping and all of that, that is going to activate you. So degree of the wakefulness and degree of to recognize or to patronize when you're going to wake up, it is all controlled by your sensory information, the amount of sensory information which is going to reach your reticular formation. Also, the pain pathway, as I told you, that was the glutaminergic pathway, that is also controlled by your reticular formation. Because if you have intense pain, you cannot sleep in that situation. And how is that possible? Because intense pain sensations are going to give a large amount of sensory pathway or sensory signals. These sensory signals will keep your reticular formation to maintain your consciousness, and in such a situation you will stay woken up, like in the situation of a toothache. Acetylcholine plays an excitatory neurotransmitter. This acetylcholine is excitatory neurotransmitter. The efferent fibers which are going out of your reticular formation, all these fibers release the acetylcholine, and this that is why your skeletal muscles, your facial expression, your somatic visual sensations are controlled, because all these functions are the motor function, then motor functions are also always regulated by acetylcholine. That is why its efferent fibers have acetylcholine and they have their motor activities. With that, we come to the end of the reticular formation. In the next chapter, we are going to study the limbic system, which is a part of our mammary formation system.